if you did not see this, it should be very visible, but if you're planning on coming to the climbing meetup after this at 1:30, it'll go a lot faster if you pre-sign the waivers, so I do recommend doing that. I'm going to show this information again at the end of the talk though, so don't stress. The climbing meetup is at 1:30. It's technically hosted by Flip Tilda, not by me. I actually wasn't aware of that meetup when I set up this panel, but we've been in communication and kind of coordinating since. So I'll be there, and Nick's going to be there. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's at the Studio Climbing. It's only about a 6-minute walk away. Really quick to get over there. If you forget the name, it's just the closest bouldering gym. The day pass is $20. Normally it's 25. If you mention you're a part of this group, they should drop it down to 20 for you. Shoe rentals are $4 if you don't have them. Chalk bag is like 1 additional, but you can also share those with other people. So, welcome to Bouldering for Dogs. Thanks again for coming. This is awesome. Really quick show of hands. I'm not going to change anything based on this answer, but who here has never climbed before? Awesome. Okay, that's really good. Who here has climbed before, but like only infrequently? It's been a while. Cool. Okay, no, this is great. So this talk is kind of definitely aimed at you all. This is for sure just an overview. It's more for people who don't have a lot of experience. If you know a lot about climbing already, this is probably all going to be information that you know, but hopefully it can be entertaining enough to keep you in your seat. So to start it off, I'm Rebel. This is Nick. We're animals. I've been climbing for just about 3 years now. I go pretty regularly, 3 times a week indoors. I make it outside a few times a year as well, not as much as I'd like to. It's a lot of fun. It was one of those things where the very first time I went, I immediately signed up for a full membership afterwards, and I've just been going regularly ever since. This is Nick. You can tell from the size of the rock that he's not quite as experienced as I am. I'll let him give his own little introduction though before we keep going.
Yes, I'm building up to it, that's all. So I'm, the first time that I bouldered was actually last year with y'all. This one's not.
Sorry, you can use this.
Oh no!
Tragedy. Okay.
We're the first ones in this room, we're already screwing it up. But that's okay.
It's got 3 hours to dry.
Exactly. The first time that I actually bouldered was last year with them, and I just liked it a lot. I still go infrequently. I'm mostly here to make sure that you guys don't get hit by cars when we transition to going over to the bouldering gym.
An important job. So the question that you've all been coming here to answer, what is bouldering? Bouldering is climbing rocks and smaller rock formations without the use of protection of any kind, no ropes, no harnesses. Climbs generally start in a defined static position with all of your limbs off of the ground, and then they finish by topping out, which is just getting on top of the thing that you're trying to climb, or with both hands touching a marked finish hold, again in a controlled static position. Outside, it's more common that you're going to end up on top of something, and inside, it's more common that you're going to be touching a specific hold to finish. So indoors, this is kind of what it looks like. You get a lot of walls of varying angles with large, colorful holes all over them. On the right, that's kind of what a start hold will usually look like. It's marked in some capacity with a grade, with the difficulty, which we'll get to in a second. You'll want both your hands on that hold. Sometimes there's 2 holds, 1 for each hand. Get your feet off the ground, and then you just go. You can use all of the holds of the same color, and then you're climbing either to the top of the wall or to a specific finish hold that will look somewhat similar to that. Outside, it's a little bit less defined. You're usually relying on some sort of guidebook to tell you what specifically the climbs are. So you'll see something like this. This is a relatively well-marked boulder. Depending on where you're looking, you'll find way less information than this. It can sometimes be a bit of a puzzle just to figure out where you're supposed to start. But yeah, you'll just generally see the names of the climbs, the difficulty level, a rough starting position, a rough ending position, and kind of a line between the 2 points. And if you're going outside at kind of a well-established location, it's pretty common you'll run into other people who are climbing there as well, and boulderers are pretty friendly. They really like to help people out and kind of show them around and get them started. I've made friends pretty much every time I've gone outside. There's some extremes to this. Not all boulders are the same. At the low end, you have stuff like this portable mantle. This is in Squamish in British Columbia. This is a real climb. There's not a lot of things like this, but this is a 1-foot tall boulder and they do exist. And then on the high end, you get stuff like this, the Grandpa Peabody boulder. This is 55 feet tall. This is in Bishop, California. Don't expect to have to climb stuff like this if you go outside. This is definitely an extreme and definitely a pretty dangerous thing to do. But there are boulders like this, and there are boulders that are even taller. Kind of what defines a boulder is often the general ethics of the climbing ethics of the place that you're climbing at, and how most ascents are done. So you totally could do a boulder like this and have it be roped up, but if most people ascending it are doing it without ropes, it kind of gets defined this way. So let's go over to some terminology really quick, some words that you'll hear me say in the context of this talk, but also just in the context of climbing yourself or going to the gym. A problem is what you generally refer to as a specific climb that you're doing. They're called problems rather than routes because they're often pretty puzzly. You're using your brain as much as your body in a lot of cases, and that's kind of part of the fun. You're trying to figure out how to get up something and how to use your body and how to use physics to your advantage. Ascend is what you say when you have completed a boulder problem. You've sent it. A flash is when you have completed a boulder problem for the very first time. You've never touched it before, and the very first time you pull up the holds, you make it to the top. Beta is the solution that you use to send the boulder problem. So that can be very broad, the holds you use, where you put your hands, where you put your feet, but it can also be very, very specific. So that's referred to as micro beta. That can be stuff like how many fingers you grab a hold with, or the angle at which you have tilted your wrist, or whether or not you're using your big toe and your small toe at the same time, or just one or the other. It can get really, really specific, and kind of as you climb more towards your limit, this stuff becomes more important. And I think this is where climbing gets really cool. You can really agonize over tiny little details, and it feels pretty fun and rewarding to kind of figure out how to really use every ounce of your body to get you a place you're trying to go. A grade is the difficulty of a climb. We'll get to this more specifically later, but broadly speaking, a low grade is an easier climb, a high grade is a harder climb. And a dab is what you say when you have touched something that you are not supposed to touch in the process of doing the climb. That usually renders a climb ascend invalid, and you'll start over in that case. So in general, once you've pulled off the ground, you're not supposed to touch the ground again with any part of your body. If you sweep it, it's invalid. Indoors, you're not supposed to touch holds of any other color. If you touch a hold of another color while trying to do a climb, generally restart it. Outside, you could have two boulders that are kind of right next to each other, and if you're climbing one of them, you're not supposed to touch the other one. So there's lots of different styles of climbing. This is not exhaustive by any means, but just kind of a brief overview of kind of rough types of boulders and specific styles. To start off with, there's vert, which is exactly what it sounds like, short for vertical, something that is just straight up and straight down. You've got overhang, which is a wall that is tilted away so that it's overhanging to some degree. The inversion of that is slab. This is a wall that is tilted forward to some degree. At first glance, this seems like it could be kind of an easier style of climbing, but it's not quite the case. Slab kind of stresses a lot of different skills. It can be really bouncy. The holds are often worse than you expect. You can be in unstable positions. You get lots of sloped holds where you're relying on friction to kind of hold yourself on the wall. Slab can be pretty controversial. Some people really, really love it, and some people really, really hate it. It's often a little bit, I can see some thumbs down over there. It's often a little bit scary to fall on slab. If your foot slips, it feels more sudden and unexpected than if you're trying to hold on to something and your grip just gives out. I think slab is fantastic. I think everyone should train slab. I think it makes you better at other styles of climbing, and it's a lot of fun and it's really rewarding, but to each their own. Cave or roof climbing is, again, what it sounds like when you're climbing kind of directly upside down on a roof or the roof of a cave. This looks and feels really impressive, and it is definitely a little bit more challenging than some styles of climbing, but it is also just its own series of techniques, and you're just creating tension in different ways. The holds are often a little better to compensate for the extreme angle. I think this is easier than overhang, personally. And then you've got crack or off-width climbing. This is a lot more common outside than it is inside. Some commercial gyms don't set with crack features at all, but some do. But outside, these are super common. You'll see them everywhere. This is, instead of pulling on holds, you're wedging parts of your body into cracks and creating jams and pressure against the sides of the wall in order to let yourself move up. So, what's so cool about climbing. What's so cool about bouldering? Let me evangelize for a few minutes here. So I liken this to a 3D body puzzle. Figuring out how to move is really fun. Like I said earlier, bouldering is really thinky. At the very low end, it's pretty easy to get yourself up the easiest climbs, but as things get trickier, it really does become a puzzle to try to figure out how to move and how to get yourself up things in an efficient way. When you're first starting, there'll be a lot of climbs that are perfectly within your physical capabilities, but you just kind of have to get the right techniques and the right specifics in order to figure out how to actually get yourself up there before you're too tired out. There's a real tangible progression to it. So if you're a gamer, this will probably feel familiar. This really tickles the lizard part of my brain personally, but there's a built-in progression. Like there's a grading system built into the sport. So when you get a climb of a new grade for the first time, it feels really cool. You feel like you've kind of moved up a level, and as you get more familiar with a different grade, like it feels like you're getting better, and you've got this real kind of tangible way to measure your progress. It's not important to focus on it too much because, as I'll get into, grades are a little bit floaty. You'll find things that feel harder or easier depending on what you like to do, but it is a lot of fun. It increases your confidence with heights. I found this personally, but for a direct example, my buddy who I started climbing with 3 years ago has a pretty crippling fear of heights. And when we first started, there were sections of the gym that he just wouldn't climb on at all. He would just not complete climbs when they're there because they went too high. But 3 years later, he's done multiple hard climbs on the top of every single section, and the fear of heights still exists, but it really does kind of act as a sort of exposure therapy, and you can feel your own confidence with your body in those situations really kind of increase. And that spreads to stuff I've found outside of climbing directly as well. Climbing is both social and solo. It can be meditative and collaborative. It's a really great way to meet new people if you want to. Pretty much every time I've gone to a new gym or gone outside, I've ended up in conversations with people just pretty naturally. It's fun to work on a problem together, and it's fun to just chat with people. Bouldering involves a lot of sitting around, so you just kind of end up in situations where it's easy to kind of talk to people nearby. But if you just want to go to the gym, put on a pair of headphones, not talk to a single other person, also totally valid. People do it all the time. Also really cool to just be out in nature by yourself, away from pretty much anyone else, find a kind of out of the way, far away boulder, and just have a solo climbing experience. It also adds another layer to travel. This doesn't even have to be like traveling far. It could be as simple as just like driving to the next town. Every single gym kind of has its own feel. The route setters who actually create the boulders in the gyms have their own styles. A specific gym kind of has their own code of difficulty and the types of holds that, like wall angles they have access to. It feels really different and unique every place you go. And this is doubly true with going outside. There's world famous climbing locations everywhere, and infinite number of more not so famous ones. So if you're already traveling, this is kind of another activity you can kind of get yourself to do in new places. It's a great way to meet people, but it can also be a reason to travel in and of itself. It's also a new way to engage with nature. Rocks are really cool, man. This is gonna be, this is a little hard to explain, I think, if you haven't experienced it, but when you engage with the climb outdoors specifically, and you look at a rock, it just looks like a rock, but when you have put your hands all over it and really felt out all the features of it and felt how it feels to move up this thing that just kind of is naturally existing, it makes you think of that rock in a new way. And I have very distinct associations with so many of the rocks that I've climbed outside, and when I think about them, I think about the experience of moving up them and how hard it was to get there, whether it was a nice climb or kind of a harsh climb, how it felt to get to the top. Yeah, it just kind of puts that stuff in your brain in a different way. It's really neat. And then, yeah, lastly, you get to use your entire body. I think moving this way is kind of a celebration. Like, it just feels good to move intentionally and to kind of master a new way of moving around and getting up stuff that it's not necessarily super intuitive when you first start doing it, but kind of starts feeling intuitive and like second nature the more you do. So, talk about grading a little bit. In North America, we usually use the B scale. This goes from 0 to 17. 0 is the easiest, 17 is the hardest. Currently, the cap does raise over time, so there are no V18 boulders yet, but there probably will be within the next few years. The grade is the physical difficulty of the easiest way up the climb. Grades stick in over time and they change based on consensus. This is not necessarily true inside, where the person who creates the climb just sets the grade and then the climb itself is going to go away in a few months. But outdoors, boulders last a long time, and as more people approach the climb and give their kind of like opinion on how hard or easy it is, the grades kind of like average out. This stuff is really subjective. It's often the topic of debate, sometimes really fierce debate, sometimes really just chill and casual debate. Climbs can feel easier or harder for different people depending on the style of the climb, how good that person is at the style of the climb, the body type of the person climbing it, how tall or short you are, the complexity, the head game, how scary it is. And it is important to note, though, that complexity and danger are not factored into the grade of the climb. So you can have a boulder that goes 10 feet off the ground, really super safe landing. The moves are really obvious, like even if you've barely climbed before, you can tell exactly what to do, but they're kind of early and hard. And that climb could be graded harder than something that goes 55 feet up in the air. If you fall off at the top, you have a good chance of probably dying. And it's a really complex sequence that's not obvious and is like frictiony and kind of like easy to fall off of. That could still technically be an easier climb. So there's a lot of factors you should look at before jumping onto something. Indoor and outdoor grading is a little bit different as well. Grades below V0 exist outside. There's VB for V basic or V easy, depending on where you go, and that encompasses kind of its own little sub-range of grades. If you're looking at a guidebook, it'll often separate those grades into a more discrete measures of difficulty. But outdoors, V0 climbs are not intended to be climbed by first-time climbers often. They're intended to be kind of a base level of challenge for someone who already knows kind of what they're doing. But inside, gym climbing is meant to be approachable for everybody. V0 is the obvious start to the scale, and it's meant to be something that if you have no experience climbing, if you're maybe don't have that much physical exercise experience at all, you could still climb up. If you can climb a ladder, there's stuff that you can climb in a gym. But grades tend to even up indoors and outdoors over time. Usually around V7 or so is what people say. The climbs start to feel roughly the same difficulty, but the styles are not the same. Outdoor climbing stresses different skills, such as like route reading, because outdoors there's not a bunch of colorful holds that are obvious where you're supposed to put your hands and feet. Footwork becomes more important, creative movement. There's often a lot more ways to approach a climb outside because it's just set by nature, not by a specific person with an intention. And head game too, because climbing is a little bit scary outside. Falling is scary. The landings are worse, the pads are smaller, they're a little bit harder. So really quick, getting started, I want to go over some just kind of rough costs to expect and like gear that you need. Indoors, the upfront cost is a little bit lower, but the kind of long-term cost is higher. It can be a pricey hobby. So the gym membership, again, these are kind of North American averages. For a day pass, you're probably looking at 20 to 30 bucks. If you go a lot, a membership makes more sense, and that'll cost you between probably 80 and 110 on average. You can find outliers on either side of these scales depending on where you are. But yeah, it's kind of the cost of a normal, like mid-range gym membership, just in general. Indoors, you have the option of renting shoes and chalk because gyms will always rent these out to you. Usually that'll be $4 to $5 every time you go. So if you're going a lot, again, it does average out to be cheaper in the long run if you buy your own. Shoes, you can spend anywhere from $60 to like $220 for a pair. If you are new, I recommend not spending $220. You'll wear through shoes kind of fast at the start, and cheaper shoes often do last a little bit longer as well, which sounds counterintuitive, but it's because they use a rubber that is not quite as sensitive, so it's not as high performance, but it can take more of a beating. And once you've gone through your first pair of shoes, you'll have a much better idea of what you value in a pair and how much you're willing to spend on a new one. A chalk bag and chalk can maybe run you 30 to 50 bucks for the first time you pick one up, but if you really care about costs, like you can probably find a $5 block of chalk online, put it in a plastic bag, and you can also be good to go. Outdoors, the upfront cost is a little bit higher because you need a crash pad as well and you can't rent gear, but the long-term cost is a lot cheaper. A crash pad is just a portable pad that you carry with you, pop underneath the landing for a climb so that if you fall off, you're not going to break an ankle or something worse. New, this could be $150 to $400 on average, but if you live in a place with other climbers, or you're near a climbing gym, I recommend checking out Craigslist or the want ads just on the poster, on the like bulletin board in a climbing gym nearby. You can probably find a used one for under $100. It's not unreasonable. Shoes and chalk bags, same price, but you do have to buy them. And then I recommend a physical or digital guidebook. It's really nice to have a physical one, both because you might not have cell phone service out depending on where you're climbing, but also because it helps support the local climbing community. You'll get kind of stories about the area and the climbs themselves, and it feels good to kind of have more of a voice kind of talking about the crag itself and the climbs that you're on. But you should also substitute with a digital guidebook. Mountainproject.com is a great place to start. It's a pretty old resource with a very wide collection of climbing information that's constantly updated. There's pictures and information about how to get places. There's a map you can look at that will let you plug in a location and let you find where there are kind of concentrations of climbs near you. So for the upcoming field trip to the gym, I want to go over gym etiquette really quick. The most important thing is look up. You should always assume that if someone is climbing on the wall that they could fall off at any point. So you want to always be aware of where people are on the walls. There's lots of blind corners in gyms. If you are walking around a corner, you want to make sure you're looking so that you can be ready if someone is hanging on for dear life up there and about to fall onto you. It's bad for everybody if that happens. Pay attention to where your climb goes before starting. Climbs sometimes just go straight up and straight down, but sometimes they go side to side, sometimes they move horizontally right at the very top. Look at your start holds, look at all the other color holds, follow it up, and then do the same for people who are on the wall nearby, and if your climb is going to intersect with somebody else's climb, don't jump on just yet. And then likewise, if falling off your climb at any point could have you falling onto somebody who is just kind of lounging around on the mat, please ask them to move before jumping on the climb. Even if you feel very confident, you can fall at any point technically, and even if they should be paying attention, they might not be. It would be bad for them if you fell on them, but it would also be bad for you. Don't crowd the wall, and don't monopolize sections of the wall if possible. There's very limited space in the gym that we're going to specifically, so if you're not actively climbing something, step away and make sure you're not standing in front of a climb that someone else might want to be doing. Likewise, don't just stand in front of a climb and go up and down it 10 times in a row. Let other people work in with you. There's only so many climbs, and it's pretty bad etiquette to just like take one for yourself. You should try to be sharing the wall as much as possible. And then the last one is ask before giving people advice. Like I mentioned earlier, figuring out how to do a climb is often a big part of the fun for people. Some people don't mind at all if you give them advice, but some people get really, really touchy about it, especially if they feel like they're close to figuring it out. So if you see someone struggling and you think you know what to do or you do know what to do, feel free to ask them if they want your help, and chances are they might say yes, but don't just assume that they want it. And then some general tips. So rest between attempts, or you will be very surprised at how quickly you tire yourself out. I generally wait at least 5 minutes between really high effort climbs or attempts, sometimes longer depending. You don't need to feel like you have to wait that long, but if you're going for the first time and you just start running around and climb up things nonstop, you will probably be done in 15 or 20 minutes, and your arms will be sore the rest of the day, and you will be a little bit disappointed that you didn't get to stay there longer. Part of the fun of bouldering is sitting around and talking to other people, and so you just have to learn to embrace that. Practice and get comfy with falling. I'm not going to do a demonstration right here, but I'll explain it roughly. Generally what you want to do is you want to land on your feet first, bend your knees, roll onto your back, chuck your chin to your chest so you don't get whiplash, and then cross your arms so that you're not filling around, you're not trying to brace yourself with a wrist in a way that you're going to snap it. If you're going to the climbing meetup, I'm going to be there a little bit early and for a few hours. Feel free to grab me, and I would love to give anyone who wants it a demonstration and a little lesson on how to fall safely at any point, whether you're early or late. Also, save your knees. Take it for someone who is getting a little bit up there in years. Your knees are a part of your body that goes faster than you want them to. And just repeated stress is a bad thing to put on them. Also, if you climb down slowly, you are less likely to fall in an uncontrolled way and hurt yourself. It's not going to be a problem if you just jump down a few times just in general, but you should get in the habit of kind of climbing down in a controlled manner when it's possible. And then, yeah, last but not least, just have fun. There's not actually any rules to this stuff. This is all just like self-enforced. As long as you're being safe and as long as you're not getting in other people's way, you should kind of just feel free to do what you want. You can make up your own climb from existing holds. You can do a traverse along the entirety of the wall. You can do a hard climb but use one hold from an easier climb in the process. You can try doing a climb where you decide not to use a certain hold, the hold. The most important thing is just that you don't lie to people about what you've done. If you jump on a V7 and you almost do it, but you used one hold from a different climb, don't tell people you did the V7, just tell them that you did the V7 plus using a different hold, and everything will be pretty chill. And that's it. I only booked this room for half an hour, so I don't have any more to present. Thanks everyone for coming by. This is super cool to see this turnout. Yeah, 1 second. I am gonna get to questions until they kick us out. I think we have a little bit of leeway here as far as timing, but feel free to leave if you'd like. We're gonna be at the studio climbing at 1:30. I wanna see everyone there. It's gonna be a lot of fun. And yeah, thanks so much.